Hey scumbag, it's time for a lesson in thrashology, and you are watching Metal DNA.
Hello everyone, I'm Schmid from the Swiss thrash metal band Comaniac, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys for this very special episode about my favorite metal genre, which is thrash metal, here at
Metal 101.
So the tale says that thrash metal has been invented in the 1980s. It was a fusion out of punk rock, which gave a really rebellious approach to the music, to thrash metal, as well as the new wave of British heavy metal, which was more of a melodic and musical approach to the genre. Forming out of these two genres, thrash metal has immediately been associated with the rebellious and rude youth out of this politically pretty conservative century. And that's also where lyrics and the sound of a lot of the original thrash metal bands came from. It was all around rebellion, all around criticism in political as well as social fields, and of course about violence. What really made this genre unique was its immense intensity. Played really dirty and furious, but also really technical in terms of speed, very precise playing, which was not really common at this time. Formative for the sound as well was the technique called downpicking, playing these power chords. That was definitely something new for the scene back then. And then of course there was a very special guitar pedal, which is called the Ibanez Tube Screamer, which formed guitar sound and made it really, compressed and dense. How to describe it would be, you take this whole pile of shit and put it together to one place to make it really heavy. So it was the perfect match between precision and this attitude playing, which still today catches a lot of young people or people with a youthful mind to this music. So it's no surprise that the lyrics as well as album artworks are often inspired by political or social misbehaviors. It was at that time that a very specific artist called Ed Repka was associated with thrash metal, being an official visualizer for many thrash metal bands at this time, and also until nowadays. Thinking about thrash metal bands, it's outstanding that there is normally one drummer, two guitarists and one bassist, while the bassist or the guitarist is taking over with the main vocals. Other instruments are not really familiar in thrash metal. You could even say that they are like non-existent. I guess that shows the emotional part, that many people are very connected with this genre, and they try to keep it pure, keep it very straightforward. That's what they know and that's what they love. In my opinion, in thrash metal, it sometimes seems a bit too cramped with the genre. It's difficult to try new things in thrash metal because people normally are not accepting it as in other genres. Going back to vocals, having the guitarist or the bassist taking over with the main vocals, it is kind of obvious that in thrash metal the vocals are not as important as in other genres, and especially in thrash metal there is more weight on the guitarists and the so-called riffing. It also shows the kind of approach to thrash metal, that it is more of a band experience playing the music. It's also very live-based music. A lot of festivals are booking thrash metal bands because it's great music for live experience. So the band is really in the center of it all. Maybe different to other genres where the vocalist is more exposed than the band. So the sound is pretty much built by the riff, and the vocals are more of a screaming, shouting, maybe even growling factor, which kind of underlines the rebellious and provocative sound of thrash metal. Thinking about thrash metal bands, you're immediately confronted with the
Big Four.
And the Big Four are the four bands which have hugely influenced the genre and also are considered the pioneers of the genre. The big four are the four bands Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer and Anthrax, and in my opinion all are absolutely worthy to be considered pioneers of the genre, because they stand for a very specific kind of thrash metal. So you can almost categorize all the bands which came later to their part of the big four. Now this is a topic to get people very emotional and very angry, so this is the place to go. Let's talk about the
Big Four.
So the first band of the big four I want to mention is Metallica, because they are the most popular band out of the
Big Four.
and of course one of the pioneers of thrash metal. But not only in thrash metal, they have influenced many other subgenres of the scene. Their 1986 released album Master of Puppets is considered one of the most important of the genre. I think no other band out of the big four could do such a great fusion out of punk rock and new wave of British heavy metal as Metallica did. No other band could sound as brutal but still very musically intelligent, but also the songwriting being very accessible for most of people, while still using different time changes and accents in the music. And it was Metallica as well who invented the so-called power ballad, a kind of ballad but mixed with a few thrash metal motifs. By also using clean instruments and a lot of dynamics in their music, they gained a lot of mainstream attention, but also gave a lot of color for the thrash metal scene. Bands who, in my opinion, had a similar mindset and similar music in thrash metal were bands like Testament, Mortal Sin or Anthrax. Going on with the second band of the
Big Four,
Megadeth, which kind of was the most unusual band out of the big four for thrash metal. In my opinion, they gave the most artistic approach of thrash metal to the genre. Of course, Megadeth was also influenced by punk music, but overall Megadeth just topped everyone out of the big four in their musicality. That might be the reason why Megadeth was also associated with a genre called speed metal. Their most famous album is definitely the 1990 released album Peace Sells.
Rust in Peace.
Bands who, in my opinion, have a similar approach to thrash metal like Megadeth are, for example, Annihilator or Forbidden. So if you like Megadeth, go check them out. Moving on to
Slayer!
They are more like the opposite of Megadeth, being absolutely brutal, absolutely giving a shit about musical theory, just doing their chromatic stuff, but ultra violent. That's also why they highly influenced all the extreme metal coming afterwards, like death metal and black metal. Their 1986 released album Raining Blood is one of their masterpieces and still is one of the most extreme albums in metal history. Bands who, in my opinion, have the same direction of thrash metal like Slayer are, for example, Sepultura or Dark Angel. So if you like Slayer, go check them out. While all the mentioned bands from the big four are located in the western US, there was one band called Anthrax from the eastern US, and they are also included in the big four. And what made them very unique was their not too serious approach to thrash metal, lyrically but also musically. You could even say they were kind of the nerds or the surfer boys from the thrash metal scene, and opened the doors for genres like crossover or new metal. They're also the only band who had a singer without playing an instrument besides singing. Other than the other bands of the big four, Anthrax always struggled to keep its place in the big four. In my opinion, they absolutely deserve it because they had such a big influence to other genres as well, and were right there at the beginning, bringing huge influential albums for other bands. Their milestone was of course their 1987 released album Among the Living. The bands who have, in my opinion, a similar approach to thrash metal might be bands like Overkill or Last Rocket. While all these big four bands were located in the US, you also had a thrash metal development in Europe, especially in Germany. There the so-called Teutonic thrash metal was invented by also four bands called Tankard, Creator, Sodom and Destruction. What made them different from the US bands was that they were influenced also highly by more extreme forms of music. For example, bands like Bathory, Celtic Frost or Venom, who brought a very destructive feeling to the music. That's also why they might sound a bit less musically, but more rude and definitely more primitive than the US thrash. This then led to a new kind of subgenre of thrash metal called black thrash metal. Talking about subgenres in thrash metal, I think thrash metal always struggled to accept these subgenres. Talking about subgenres in thrash metal, I think thrash metal is a very conservative genre, but also a very dedicated one. What I mean by that is that thrash metal had a big crisis in the 1990s, and while many thrash metal bands grew older, they tried to get different influences in their music, which came with different tempos, different time changes, and that didn't really work for thrash metal and its audience. I think a lot of thrash metal listeners are kind of narrow-minded in their music. There is this classical riff and the classic drum beat for thrash metal, and as soon as it didn't work out with this classical approach for thrash metal, it was considered as
Sellout
music. That's why thrash metal was pretty much gone in the 1990s. While they tried to take the foot off the gas, tried to do a heavier approach to thrash metal, it was banned instantly, and that's also why a lot of thrash metal bands in the 90s didn't get any attention anymore. I also want to mention that thrash metal until now doesn't really use subgenres, different than, for example, death metal, where you have classical death metal, you have melodic death metal, you have death and roll, you have deathcore, and so on. And in thrash metal, there is very little difference in their subgenres. For example, thrashcore or modern thrash metal or whatever, that's not really a thing in this genre. Of course, you have attempts for thrash metal subgenres like progressive thrash metal, having names like Voivod. You have technical thrash metal with bands like Coroner, and you might as well say you have groove thrash metal or groove metal, which is very near to thrash metal with bands like Pantera or Lamb of God. But this is also a very emotional topic for most of the people, talking about Pantera, if they are a thrash metal band or not. What do you think? Thrash metal today is still pretty much formed by the bands out of the 80s who still enjoy a lot of respect for their work. Of course, you have a few new names now to keep the genre going. You have bands like Havoc, Warbringer, Vector from the US, Municipal Waste, who have worked for more than 10 years now on their career and had like a few years now where they could get the fruits out of their work right now. And of course, you have also a few bands in Europe who were kind of active the last few years. Bands like Dustbolt, Evil, Angelus Patrida, Cry6 and Suicidal Angels. And of course you have a big underground scene where the bands kind of struggle to attach their name to the thrash metal genre. So it seems like in thrash metal you really have to approve your name during a long time to be established in thrash metal, and I think that's also the reason why newer bands kind of struggle to be a part of it. You know, you have those bands who have already established their name, and now it's time for the newer bands to bring some color into the genre. And at this time I would love to introduce you to my band called Comaniac. We just released our newest record back there, Holodox. It's our third album. We are around for, I guess, 8 years now. Have released 3 albums, Return to the Wasteland being our first offering, a very Bay Area punkish thrash metal album. If you like that, go check it out. Instruction for Destruction being our second offering, and just now released Holodox, trying to bring a few progressive and technical elements to the genre. If you enjoy that, go check it out, we really appreciate it. So thanks again for you guys for checking this video. support this channel, subscribe and like this video, and see you around. Bye bye.